Hello and welcome to Postgres FM, a weekly show about all things PostgreSQL. I am Michael, founder of PG Mustard, and I'm joined by Nick, as usual, from Postgres AI. Hey Nick, how's it going?
Everything is fantastic. How are you, Michael?
Yeah, good. Good also,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
What are we talking about this week?
So this week, we are talking about let's move out of RDS or put your own managed Postgres name there and how.
Yeah, so you mentioned how to move off RDS, but I was going to ask how specific you wanted to be to, well, because there's even multiple flavors of RDS in terms, even Postgres compatible.
Yeah, it's great, and we have a lot of managed service providers, and that's super
Yeah.
good. Super good. They have all of them have their pros and cons. Some of them already dead. We must say and there's a saying like a human can be not only can be dead, it can be suddenly dead, and this is true about this is from Russian literature.
Okay.
Bulgakov, yeah, Master and Margarita. So managed Postgres service can be suddenly dead also. And we know several examples. And what annoys me is how they provide very short notice sometimes. I don't expect this from RDS, but who knows, right?
No, definitely not.
RDS is huge, right? But we know Google can kill services, not with 30 days short notice, right, or 2 weeks. But among recent examples, I remember Bit.io, which was interesting idea, drop a CSV file and it gives you Postgres and you can start querying. I remember, I think Tambor is a recent example, right?
Yeah, but how much notice are they giving?
Bit.io gave, I think, 30-day notice only.
Wow.
It's not all right for databases. We know how difficult it is to do any action if you exceed, for example, 1 terabyte, and it's already like significant size. When any move you need to plan carefully and practice and test and then perform. Yeah, well, Tembo, right? Tembo, I think they completely pivoted to different area, and also PostgreSML is a new example. And but PostgreSML, I think one of the founders is PGCat. He was here long ago.
Lev.
Right, but PostgreSML is closed, but others as well, right? So I think it happens. So one of the reasons to migrate out is lack of control. I think, if we already discussed reasons, do we?
Yeah, let's do it a little bit. I hear people talking a little bit about costs, but I think the ones I see more often seem to be, low-level access extensions. Like if you've got a specific extension you want supported, you might migrate, I guess sometimes between providers rather than off. But yeah, migrating off it also could include migrating onto a different one.
Yeah, definitely, because some of them are much more open, some of them, not many, but some. Crunchy, right? Crunchy Bridge.
Yeah, or some support different extent. Like maybe the extension you want is on one managed service, but not another.
You want Timescale DB, you need to migrate to Timescale Cloud.
Yeah.
Right?
Or even, I think I saw a conversation you were having that, is it PL Proxy?
Oh, Cloud SQL, yeah.
Yeah.
Because HANA CrossSQL is working there. This is my theory. That's why PGQ and Sky Tools are there, basically, right? So, and PL Proxy as well. So, yeah, well, and all others only have, not actually all others. RDS doesn't have even PG Bouncer, which also originated from Skype 20, almost 20 years ago.
No way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, PG Bouncer is the most popular product created inside Skype 20 years ago. Others are PGQ, Londeste, and PL Proxy. I think there are more, but these I used and remember very well.
Nice.
So yeah, if we talk about reasons, there are many reasons. For me, inside me, and services are different. Some of them are open, some of them are fully based on open source, which is great, like Supabase. And we not strictly based on open source, and this is great. Some of them provide super user like Crunchy Bridge or access to physical backups. It's miracle among managed Postgres providers. But most of them are telling you we are protecting you, give us almost twice more money, and we will limit your access to your own things, and we will take care of backups and failover, HA and DR, and some other features. And all of these features are very good established already in open source ecosystem. So I think anger lives inside me and grows towards managed service providers, because I think, first of all, they make money, much more money than they should on open source, not contributing back enough. Not everyone, but many. But most problem is, I truly believe they stole the openness from us. The open source, which we loved, always comparing to SQL Server, Oracle, or Linux versus Microsoft Windows. Those guys who create managed service providers, among them are great engineers, and I admire and have huge respect to many of them. But at grand schema, this is new, like Oracle and vendor lock-in and closed everything, and bad processes, inability to fix problems, understand what's happening, and so on. All things which open source intended to solve. Like, for example, you have, like, why I stopped using Oracle 8i in 2000? Because I spent 3 days trying to fix something. It worked on one machine, it didn't work at our client's machine. And then I read somewhere, okay, internet already was a thing. I read somewhere that if hostname has a closing parenthesis, then Oracle cannot connect. You cannot connect to Oracle, and no errors, nothing. And I eventually switched to open source, where such kind of problems you can troubleshoot easily. Like if you have advanced skills. And many people, they are not dumb. Like many people are quite smart and can learn how to use Perf or so and troubleshoot. But managed service providers stole this openness and ability to see what's happening, and they just packaged open source in form of service, charged a lot of money, and also closed important features like access to physical backups or ability to physical replication connection, basically implementing vendor lock-in.
So, but they didn't steal it, right? It's licensed that way deliberately to be very permissive, Postgres. So there's
It's Postgres, right? It's open source. It's just the same as Postgres. We almost didn't change it. Use it as is. It's Postgres, and it's like enterprise level.
to call it. You mean it's calling it Postgres is what you're frustrated
they
about.
call it Postgres, and Postgres popularity. Actually, it's two-side question, because I also think RDS contributed to the rise of Postgres popularity around 2015. I think JSON was a big contributor, but if you check carefully, RDS probably was bigger contributor to the growth of Postgres popularity, because everyone hated installing Postgres. This is true. But things are changing. It's much easier these days to install Postgres.
When I got more and more involved in the Postgres community maybe 6 years ago, most Postgres committers were, I didn't look at the numbers, but I think from memory, most committers and contributors to Postgres were working at consulting firms who did a lot of community work, but also, I guess, implementing features for their clients. These days, I wouldn't be surprised if, and I know the lines are blurred between consulting firms and managed service providers these days, but I wouldn't be surprised if I definitely know that lots and lots of committers are moving to the hyperscalers and other managed service providers.
Of course.
But what I mean is there is some contributing back from them. But I do take your point that there's an interesting dynamic here, and I would be interested in your take on what proportion of people are moving for those kind of ideological reasons versus cost reasons, because you mentioned it's like double the price for less access. Which of those is more important to people, the double the cost or the less access?
That's a good question. First of all, again, question is not like one-sided. I admit all things RDS brought and others brought and brought, like it's for sure. But also, I just feel it like how working with Oracle and SQL Server, not understanding what's happening, always like a need to reach out support and waiting months to get any small response. I was it's hard. Then working with open source, you just see how it works, and you can even fix it if needed, or you can troubleshoot. It's like documentation always lacks details. So source code is best documentation and ability to debug. It's like this is a huge part of open source concept for me, and this lacks there, right? So for me, it's a big problem, but I 100% understand I'm in minority here. Right? But I'm not afraid to be in minority. 20 years ago, Postgres itself was deeply in minority, deeply. It was like MySQL everywhere, Oracle is in enterprise. What is Postgres, right? So I truly believe that RDS rise started roughly 10 years ago, maybe 12, right, around that time. It was like a storm. Heroku started first, and I think Heroku was historically first, good managed Postgres, right? And RDS, others, everyone has it. Even IBM or Hub has it, or Oracle has it. It's insane, absolutely insane. So I truly believe this peak we already should go down, or soon will start go down, and something new has to be created. This is what I feel. Maybe it will take 10 years or so, another 10 years. But it should not be so, because the whole philosophical point of open source is deeply disturbed, right? It sucks to troubleshoot problem on RDS trying to reproduce it on regular Postgres. You try to guess things all the time. You don't see, you are blind, right? Some database is suffering. Postgres, their support is slow or unexperienced.
We're repeating a conversation we've had several times.
Yeah. Well, the problem is like for me, this season is deep. It's strong, but I also understand I'm among very few people who feel it, I think.
So why bring this one up about how to move off? Is it because you want people to move, or is it because you're seeing that they're moving and they need advice?
I want to start this discussion. I also know that probably more people will move because of budgets, especially economical reasons. They can you at some point you realize you spend a lot on RDS and other services probably, but RDS sometimes is huge. It can be. Sometimes it's between 20 or 50% of whole budget for cloud RDS. Yeah. And I think there are interesting pieces of how you can get support. As I understand, to get support at RDS, whole account should be upgraded. So you cannot upgrade only RDS part. But this I'm not sure. What I'm sure, it costs a lot, and it costs for something that can be achieved with open source and a little bit of support from some guys. You can hire those guys, or you can use services, but it will cost a fraction of what you can have on AWS. And so sometimes some companies are in trouble. They check spendings. They see big check, say 10,000 per month for some small company. It's significant money, right? So you can hire a guy for this. And you check what you can achieve on low costers like Hetzner or OVH or something. And you see you can drop it 5 times. Why not, right? Or maybe it can be 100 and 20,000 after migration. And you see that, as I said, between 20 and 50% of costs are databases, right? We're talking about guys who are not growing fast and not raising a lot, but they need to survive as well. There are such companies, and sometimes they need help as well.
Yeah. So the cynic in me is thinking, so Nikolai wants more customers.
No, unfortunately, in this case, I can help one time, like Moo, but we don't have solution yet. Maybe others might have solutions to this, and sometimes it's Kubernetes, sometimes it's not Kubernetes. I would prefer not Kubernetes in this case. If you're very familiar with Kubernetes, okay, good. There are options, but I would just prefer maybe old school solution without additional layers. If it's a small project, it's maybe easier. And we can help, but I'm not looking for customers, because this is actually not super huge customer usually. We had such cases, but it's small project for us to migrate, and I just wanted to share some pieces of advice and start like spark this negotiation about why like we like use RDS so much while backups HA and DR already solved in open source, fully solved. You take Patroni and PGBcrest or WorldG, that's it, and just find some packaging or build your own, and that's it. Yeah. So not convincing or what?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're right at a certain scale, but I think there's a lot of smaller scales where it just makes sense. Like, it doesn't make as much sense to try and save that amount of money for the...
How much, like, let's take some company. How much is total cost and like in percentage, how much databases?
Yeah, good question. But I think, like, even up to spending... Well, definitely less. If you're spending less than $1,000 a month on the database, like, why bother? Like,
not noticeable, right? But if it's
but
several,
do you see what I mean? Like, that's quite a big. Like, for a lot of very small startups, they won't be spending that. So,
well,
I think there are a lot.
Well, depending on the term small, because if it's still small team, but they accumulated a lot of data, the budget for to keep this data in RDS Postgres will be high. And I think we touched a little interesting question. I think there is some threshold where you can estimate how much effort in terms of engineering resources it will take. And then how much, like, there should be some threshold. Below that, it's not like reasonable to move out of RDS. But above that, it might be reasonable, especially considering that quality of Patroni, WorldG, and BGBcrest, it's very good enough. They are battle proven many years already, right? And so I think, and we see in RDS, I don't know if they implemented using Patroni, but this so-called HA cluster, in addition to multi-AZ cluster, in addition to multi-AZ instance, 3-node cluster, it already looks like classic Patroni setup, right? And if you compare costs, it will be interesting. But also, if you move out of AWS out of cloud or to cheaper cloud like Hetzner Cloud, which has regions in the US and a lot of regions, not a lot, some regions.
As of recently, yeah.
Yeah. And they also, since I think last year, have S3 compatible object storage for backups, but only in Europe. That's a problem.
Oh, really?
That's a problem. I hope they will add it to US regions as well soon. And I actually really like their dedicated offering. I used it many years ago when I was bootstrapping it. And I know many people use it. And sometimes customers come to us and they use Hetzner for bootstrapping, and it makes sense. It's even more like cost saving, but it's also not available in the US, unfortunately. So anyway, if you take that price for instances, EC2 versus virtual machine and Hetzner Cloud, it's already 5x. But on top of that, premium AWS adds to run backups and failover and other services they provide. It's additionally like 60-70%, right?
Yeah. Well, but okay. So I think we've covered enough on like why. I think two
reasons. Control and money and control. Yeah.
So then I think the trickier question is how, and especially how to do it with minimal or no downtime.
Yeah. Well. It's again, this is not only about RDS. Maybe you want to migrate out of other like Cloud SQL or Crunchybridge or something, despite their achievements. First thing, like let's talk about versions, compatibility, plugins. If you move out to different cloud, it's of course important to compare all the extensions and capabilities, versions supported, how fast the service delivers minor upgrades. This is a big deal. Because if they lag, it's like some flag for me. Like we need to make sure if bugs happen in Postgres, it will be delivered to my setup quickly. Also, how my major upgrades are done, right? What kind of control I have there. But if it's to your hands, well, it's easier because you can it's open source. You can take any extension. Besides extensions, AWS, for example, created for RDS and didn't publish to open source. They have it, like AWS Lambda, extensions for plant control in Aurora, to freeze plans, so
Oh yeah.
to mitigate plan flips, to avoid plan flips. These extensions, unfortunately, are not available in open source, so you need to find a replacement. But this is rare actually. So usually people it's either observability related capabilities, you can find a replacement for it, or it's something people usually rarely use. So most of the offering in RDS, it's based on open source pieces, and you can bring even more extensions if you have everything in your hands, right? You can have
Make your own.
yeah, make your own extension, easy, like compile everything. So
BYOE. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there was a mini conference inside the recent conference in Montreal, right? So organized by Yuri, right? It was PG Extension Day or something. I know several people who presented talks there. It was interesting. So yeah, actually, a part of my lack of love to extensions over the last 5 to 10 years is because of RDS and these guys. Because I understand if I create extension, it will take ages for them to take it, right? So if you move out, you have control and can use more extensions. What?
Yeah. So, but we're talking about some. Yeah, of course, you need to do a bit of research, bit of prep as to where you're going. But I'm assuming most people that are thinking, "How do I move off?" have done that step. I think the tricky part is often you're not able to, for example, set up logical replication to, an easy-ish way to do this would be set up a logical replica somewhere else, set up replication, decide a cutover point, pause writes, cut over, send writes to the new primary. Great, easy, done, episode done. But I believe that's not possible in most cases.
Well, it depends on the scale. So before we go there, one more thing related to extensions and compatibility. So if you want to think about like how to not to lose anything, it's important to think about observability bits. And in this case, PG wait sampling and PG stat kcache and PG stat statements and auto explain, they bring a lot of observability bits. And there are several monitoring solutions available that can be used on top of them. So idea is everyone who works with RDS, like literally everyone, they use performance insights. And it's not a good idea to migrate off and lose this bit. Fortunately, PG wait sampling, especially with recent fixes now, right, it's possible to use it and have similar charts in your monitoring thanks to that, right? So it's not only about like extensions functionality, but also additional like observability, right? So management extensions. As for cutover and so on, logical replication usually available everywhere, on RDS including, right? So you can provision logical replicas. The tricky part is how to do it if your database exceeds, say, a few terabytes or 10 terabytes. It's really not easy.
As in that first initialization, you just never catch up.
Yeah. Well, never catch up. You can use multiple slots to catch up, right?
Yeah, but you said it's not easy. Why is it because of the time between setting it up?
Right.
And
so to create logical replica, we need to do two things. First is initialization, and next is switching to CDC and catching up inside the CDC.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a huge deal in terms of CDC to catch up if you use multiple slots. Usually with one slot, you can handle workloads like 1,000 tuple writes per second. If you check PG activity, PG n-tab del, n-tab upt, UPD, and n-tab ins, these three numbers, you check how many of them you can have per second. If on modern hardware like Intel, AMD as well, ARM maybe, but maybe less, you need to go down with this threshold. 1,000 tuple writes per second. Of course, it's a relative number because it depends on the content of those tuples as well. You can, but roughly 1,000 tuples per second. You should be well. You should catch up well, just with single slot. If you have more, just use multiple slots. The only problem is that when you use a logical replication using multiple slots, foreign key violation happens temporarily. It's like eventually consistent on the subscriber, right? So you cannot use it while it's a replica. But so CDC is not a problem. Problem is this initialization, because
Yeah.
Standard approach. So there are several tricks here. First, there is binary mode. There is traditional way to create a replica with copy data set to true, but also you can set binary to true. I think it's supported since Postgres 15 or 16. In this case, it gets data in binary form, and it's kind of faster. It's not the same as to create physical replica and convert it to logical replica, which became, by the way, official in Postgres 17. I missed this. There's a new CLI tool. There is a new CLI tool, but it will be only available post 17, so in future. Now usually we have older version on production. Although if you can upgrade to 17 first, then this tool is available. But these guys don't provide you physical backups besides Crunchy Bridge.
So I was going to say, so you wouldn't be able to use this to migrate off RDS.
But this flag, what I'm talking about, like a flag binary set to true, this is for regular logical replica provisioning. It's not physical to logical conversion. It's something else. And it should speed things up. But additionally, you can speed up things to implement it manually. So if you just create slot, open transaction, export snapshot, and then dump everything in many workers. Actually, pgdump supports it. In pgdump, you can support -j, or number of jobs, and also you can specify exact snapshot to work with. If that transaction is still open and this snapshot is being held in repeatable read transaction isolation mode, a snapshot isolation, right? So it holds snapshot. Then you can use multiple pgdumps or multiple pgdump workers to export data faster. There is even more. Even more can be done here. If you have huge tables, a single worker will be work along. Like it will be single-threaded, single worker processing huge table, like billion rows, for example. And in this case, it's good to think about custom dumping and restoring using multiple workers and using like logical partitioning. Like you have ID ranges, for example. If it's integer, big int or UUID version 7. Or actually, even if it's UUID version 4, you can have ranges because it's like randomly distributed. Like
so no longer using pgdump, but like copying to CSV or something.
Copy to So something like this, and you can specify ranges and export data in huge table using multiple workers. Right. This is like this is to speed up the process, and the more we speed up, the less we need to catch up. Right.
Okay.
Obviously. But the problem with speeding up too much is if you do it from the primary, and until only recently, 16 or 17, it was when it became possible to create logical replication from physical standbys. Before that, you need to deal with primary, and this is not fun, because.
But also, I don't understand how can you on RDS set up logical replicas from a standby?
Never tried, but it should work in 17, right?
Oh. Well, I mean, the features there in Postgres, I just didn't know it was available in RDS.
I also don't know. But actually, you can think about having, so it's interesting, right? If we create a slot on the primary, and we have physical replica, theoretically we could have replica lagging a little bit. We create a slot, and then we use recovery target LSN to catch up and synchronize with slot position using physical replication, and then we pause again, and we can grab data from physical replica, and we know it will correspond exactly to the slot position, which is waiting for us, right? But the problem is RDS doesn't support recovery target LSN. You cannot change it. So my question is, can we pause replica and instead of recovery target LSN, advanced slot, if there is a function, PG replication slot advance or something like this, you can, knowing position of your physical standby, you could advance the slot, so they are again synchronized, and then you can grab your data from physical standby, and you know this data will correspond to the slot position.
So, but in reality, how are you seeing people? Like, when you do a project to move people off? What are you actually ending up doing normally?
Well, recently we decided to do it with downtime, honestly, because this project could like allocate maintenance window 3 hours, no problem. But the scale was, I think, a couple of terabytes. It was not.
Yeah.
But at this scale, actually, I would probably use traditional logical replication provisioning. But what I'm describing right now here, it's interesting because again, like we want to move as fast as possible with initialization to catch up less, right, later. But we also not want to overload the primary if it's still being used. So this trade-off is like competing reasons, right? That's why it's a good idea to move this disk I/O, reading disk I/O off the primary to a standby. And this is what I just tried to elaborate. Honestly, I never tried on RDS with. I never tried. I only tried it from self-managed.
That's why I wanted to bring us back a little bit to kind of how to move, because it feels like even though these things might be possible, they start to get quite complicated, and sometimes complexity in these situations is, well, it's scary, it's hard to test, it's hard to be sure it's going to work well, and often, because it's a project that won't happen, hopefully you won't be migrating every year or two, so hopefully it's a fairly infrequent task. People can offer, I think sometimes people can arrange for a couple of hours of downtime at a really, over a weekend, announce it really far in advance, let people, like obviously some can't, but
Yeah.
I think plenty can, and then the complexity just drops so far.
Well, there are tools. There are open source tools and there are proprietary tools additionally, which help with logical replication. For example,
like CDC type.
Yeah, so DMS from AWS and Google also supports their own tooling. And there are third-party tools like Qlik. I wouldn't recommend Qlik. They suck at Postgres for sure. But there's Fivetran. Fivetran is good proprietary tool. Like they promise to work very reliably in very big databases. So you can temporarily use them to migrate out and then stop using them. That's it. Or there are open source tools like there is pgcopy.db, which I think works fully at logical level, right? So it should be compatible with RDS by Dmitry Fontaine, right? Again, like I only know it, I never used it myself. There is something from Xata, I think. No, should be.
Yeah, I don't know.
They promise support of DDL because the problem with logical is DDL always, right? If you need to create DDL often, sometimes it's a part of user activity, DDL creation. And this is not a good position to be in because DDL is not propagated with logical replication. And it's if it's like, if you can pause it, it's great, but if you cannot, so.
Another reason to keep the window.
Yeah, I agree with
short.
you. Complexity can grow, but it's already not rocket science.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you can evaluate this complexity and how much you need to engineer, compare with your savings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point though, because if we're talking like projects that are already spending more, like a few thousand a month or more, they're gonna be of a certain scale. So there is gonna be that. I think you mentioned a couple of terabytes, and it was
sometimes
say about 2 hours of downtime or something.
Sometimes people spend millions, and we know there are cases of quite good, good like in terms of scale, bigger companies who migrated out of cloud. Even this like posts by DHH and 37 Signals.
Yeah.
So it was I think a couple of years ago already, right?
Oh yeah. All I mean is the bigger you are, the more that complexity makes sense, because well, unless I'm mistaken, I was always thinking the downtime you'd need to take would be somewhat proportional to the amount of data because of the dump restore time. So it's like, if you've got a small database, the amount of downtime you would need to cut over would be much lower.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're not gonna have a small database and be moving for cost reasons. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. By the way, there is a good approach. So we don't want to have long-lasting initialization just because we lag a lot. We just don't want to risk the health of the primary in case if we cancel this migration, because if we cancel the health of it will be disturbed because of accumulation of dead tuples and eventually bloat, right? And there is an approach. I think some tools I just mentioned they implemented. If you start consuming from CDC immediately when slot is created, and put it into some intermediate place like Kafka or something, or object storage. In this case, you like Xmin Horizon is already propagating, right?
Yeah.
So you're already using this slot. You're just using it not by the final user Postgres, but some intermediate user who will promise to deliver all the changes later when final destination will be ready. So this is also like a reasonable approach, but it adds a little even more complexity because now you need to manage Kafka, and this is a whole another story, or something else, files, files on object storage. It's like,
or like, is that what Debezium is used for?
Yeah, well, but I stopped hearing from Debezium for quite long. I don't know what's happening. If you know, like, who's listening, if you know, like, if can you leave some comments somewhere? I'm curious what's happening with this project.
So, but you raised a good point about testing. Like, what if you need to go back? Or, I mean, I think there's a valid question around how do you even test this kind of thing? How do you do a dry run?
So the trickiest part is switchover. Because you can, like it's hard to undo this because it's already like jump, right? But provisioning of logical replica, it can be tested in production. You start from non-production, then you go to production, and you are very careful. Two big risks with logical is to be out of disk space, and we have a new setting. I keep forgetting the name of new setting that can mitigate, like, so maximum size of the leg. You can control it and say better kill my slot if you achieve this this threshold. So you can set, like, I don't know, like 10 or like 100 gigabytes there to avoid risks. And second danger is to affect health, because Xmin Horizon is not advancing. So this you can just monitor and then define some threshold when you say stop, we are killing the slot, and let it go. But besides these two risks, users won't notice anything. Well, disk I/O as well. If you provision right from the primary, disk I/O can be significant if you use multiple workers. So it's better to control this.
Yeah. You also can't be doing migrations during that time. Like, you can't be doing DDL.
You can. If it's
good point.
They will just put your replication on pause, and if it's not a lot, you can just, if it's a test, what I did, I just checked in the logs. I see DDL. It's good to have log statement DDL. It's a good advice anyway for any setup, just to control like all changes. And you see, this is when DDL happened, and now our replication gets stuck because of this DDL. Okay, we have lag up to 1 minute, like when I manually propagate. It's a test, right? But the good test is like, it's production test because it's really hard. Well, I recommend starting from non-production tests, but eventually, due to complexity, production tests here, I would definitely recommend having as well.
Yeah.
Under control, risk is not high. And if you see like the lag, okay, propagated, if DDL happens, new partition is created every hour or what, right? So you can just propagate it manually and understand this spike was that. That's it. So it doesn't affect. But good thing is that users don't notice, right? So it gives you benefit of performing tests in the right inside, like in the field, right, where the real battle happens. Unlike switchover is different. Yeah. Unless you have switchover backed by PG Bouncer PostGuSU, it won't be fully zero downtime. You will need to accept like up to 1 minute loss, for example. Loss of availability, not of data. Data should not be lost, any of data. It's to switch, right? And PG Bouncer, if you want PostGuSU, I guess it should be installed on separate nodes in Kubernetes or somehow, and under your control. Because if it's PG Bouncer provided by that service, you need to switch out of that service, right? So it's quite rare when people control their own PG Bouncers, but it happens. I mean, in the case of users of managed Postgres, but it happens.
Makes sense.
It happened recently with us, like people.
So might that be a sensible initial thing to consider migrating? Like, run your own proxy. Migrate to running your own.
Oh yeah. Well, and you can start from it actually. This is what happened recently. It was managed service and PG Bouncer. That managed service provided PG Bouncer, but they didn't provide important bits of it, some control. I think PostGuSU was either not supported, I don't remember details, but definitely was not supported all the details about monitoring. So you could not export these bits to some custom monitoring solution. So first thing was migrate those PG bouncers, get control of them. Then you can have pure post resume. And it's good. Oh, important thing I forgot, also wanted to mention, when you do all this, migrate out, you need to, first thing, like you need to plan. And inside planning, it's super important to understand the topology and route trip times between the nodes, right? The distance, is it like the same region? If it's, for example, you are migrating out of RDS, but you stay inside AWS, you can have the same region. It's good, right? Because where will be your users and I mean application nodes? If they are far, it's bad. Sometimes people migrate to like, okay, Hetzner or something, and in this case, it's better to be closer. And in some AWS regions have like a couple of milliseconds latency route trip time to a few Hetzner regions. I think they have only 2 or 3, I don't remember. So maybe you first need to migrate to different region in AWS, your application nodes, I mean, to be closer to that Hetzner region. Geography matters here, like how many miles or kilometers between them. And you need to test latency. How to test latency? Like absolutely simple test is you have Postgres, you connect to it, you write \timing in pSQL and just select semicolon. And multiple times. You already see, it's not scientific, right? You need to do something better, but it's super easy because ping usually doesn't work and you need like some ways to test at TCP IP level, some route trip time. I think there are tools. What we used in the past, I don't remember, but this is the easiest way just to check round trip time to Postgres and choose better, because actually one millisecond is already noticeable, right? Like 2 milliseconds if you have many queries. 10 milliseconds I would already start hesitating to have it, right? It's you remember our first episode, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that's what you're aiming for, to have most queries be less than 10 milliseconds, right?
Yeah, because HTTP can have like many, for example, 10, and HTTP 100 milliseconds is already noticeable. Not noticeable until 200, okay. Noticeable should be noticeable for engineers, not to users yet. Okay, that's it. Like I think we covered many specific areas. I just wanted to say it's not like, it feels maybe scary, but it should not be scary. And I think in the future we will have more mature products, purely open source, delivering HA and DR in packaged form, not only in Kubernetes, but like Kubernetes is already so. You can choose among multiple Kubernetes operators, fully open source, and they have, or at least they promise to have everything. But if you don't like Kubernetes, like actually I do more and more, I don't like for databases Kubernetes more and more. In this case, I think more products will arise and help you to stop worrying about that, about backups and availability.
Yeah, I think it's good to have options as well. It's good to have a second best option when you're negotiating as well. Because if costs are the main concern, step one might be try to negotiate a lower cost, and at that point it helps to have we could actually migrate, we've looked into it and here's our plan, we can move on to something that will cost us this much less. You might be able to get a slightly best of both worlds and just get the cost reduced without having to migrate. But yeah, great. So we covered a bit of planning, we covered how to in terms of technically, we covered things you have to make sure you don't forget about, a few bits there. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I just wanted to add a comment that I understand that this discussion maybe is a little bit early. So let's like see what happens in the next, like say 5 years. And am I right to predict that the rise of new products around Postgres should happen? Right? We'll see. Right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to predict that actually I think we might even go slightly in the other direction. I think we're going to see more and more managed services, and I think they're going to be
because of AI. Mm-hmm.
Maybe because of AI, but also like some of the companies that that are spinning up thousands of these days. Like Superbase seem to be going from strength to strength. Good for them. I know Neon just got acquired, but the numbers of new databases on their platform is
They both
significant.
because of AI builders, so to speak, right?
Yeah, but not only they would. I think there was.
This is what I read in social.
I think the recent continued trend is definitely that. But Superbase, I know a lot of people building small businesses, and a lot of them are doing it on Superbase instead of Firebase in the old days. So I think there are a lot of non-AI projects on using that kind of service as well. So I'm seeing a lot of those. Maybe not at the enterprise and the larger scale projects, but it'll be interesting to see in a few years' time. Hopefully we'll have both. Hopefully we'll have both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, what I remember is the saying that, not the saying, like phrase that more and more, maybe more than half of Neon databases created, it's from integration, automation, from like say some AI vibe coding or something, and they need database, and it's just created basically fully automatically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, what the other half then?
I don't know. I don't know exact numbers. It's just what like
Yeah.
I just put some random number, 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And scale matters too, right? Like I think whilst that's a lot of databases, I don't imagine that's a lot of huge databases. Like we're probably not talking about, that's not the ones that are going to be migrating to RDS anytime soon. Most of them.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or off RDS.
It's interesting. Like I would love to see some report from good, trustworthy sources, landscape of databases in terms of sizes, budgets, and so on. Like about open source or maybe only Postgres. Like I remember some Gartner report from 2018. It's already many years ago. It was saying that open source database market exceeded 1 billion already, so it was great. But what's the distribution? Like those who are created automatically, they are small, and they are definitely below the threshold we discussed, right? Where it doesn't work.
What counts? What counts as open source? Like, is Gartner including Aurora Postgres?
Yeah.
As open source?
Well, the basis is open, but
I understand that. I think it's a blurred line at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to say. There are so many flavors. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, really a pleasure speaking with you as always. And catch you next week.
Good. Bye-bye.